What if I told you most of the decisions you believe are yours were quietly planted in your mind? Not by strangers, but by people you trust, by systems you scroll through every day, and by psychological tricks so subtle you never feel controlled. You feel free. This isn't conspiracy. This is human psychology, and once you see it, you can't unsee it. Most people believe freedom means having many choices, but psychology shows that real influence happens long before a choice is made. When options are pre-selected for you, your brain rarely questions what's missing. This is called choice architecture. Humans naturally assume that available options represent the full range of possibilities. When something is absent, the mind treats it as irrelevant or unimportant rather than deliberately hidden. As a result, you don't feel restricted, you feel guided. Your brain is wired to conserve energy. Evaluating endless possibilities is mentally exhausting, so when options are neatly presented, the brain experiences relief. It mistakes convenience for freedom. This is why curated menus, feeds, and recommendations feel helpful instead of controlling. Psychologically, once the brain accepts the frame, it stops searching outside it. You don't ask, what else exists? You ask only, which of these should I choose? Repeated exposure strengthens this effect. When the same types of ideas, products, or lifestyles appear again and again, the brain begins to see them as normal and widely accepted. This is known as the availability heuristic. People judge reality based on what comes to mind easily. What you see often feels common. What you never see feels extreme, unrealistic, or unnecessary, even if it's healthier, smarter, or more truthful. Over time, this framing reshapes your preferences. You don't just choose from the options, you begin to want them. Your tastes, opinions, and goals slowly align with what is repeatedly presented. This is why influence rarely feels external. The decision feels internal, personal, and authentic. But psychologically, desire itself has been guided by exposure, repetition, and omission. The most powerful part of this control is that it removes the sense of being controlled at all. There is no pressure, no force, no obvious manipulation. The mind believes it is acting independently, while operating inside invisible boundaries. True freedom is in who's choosing. Confidently, it's being aware of who decided which choices you were allowed to see in the first place. The human brain processes information through two different systems working at very different speeds. One system reacts instantly, driven by emotion and instinct, while the other takes time, analyzing details and weighing consequences. Psychological research shows that the fast, emotional system always activates first. By the time logic steps in, an initial judgment has often already been made. This means influence doesn't need to defeat your reasoning. It only needs to arrive before reasoning wakes up. Emotions like fear, guilt, validation, and scarcity are especially powerful because they're tied to survival and social belonging. Fear alerts the brain to danger. Guilt pushes us to repair social bonds. Validation signals acceptance, and scarcity triggers urgency. These emotions bypass careful thought because, evolutionarily, hesitation once meant risk. When someone activates these feelings, the brain prioritizes response over reflection, even in situations that are not truly urgent or threatening. Once an emotional response is triggered, logic does not disappear, but its role changes. Instead of questioning the situation objectively, logic begins to justify the emotional reaction. This is known as motivated reasoning. The mind searches for explanations that support how it already feels, rather than asking whether that feeling was warranted in the first place. At T-stage, people can be influenced without deception, because the brain fills in convincing reasons on its own. This is why emotionally charged messages are more persuasive than factual ones. A message that makes you anxious, hopeful, or insecure will be remembered more clearly and acted on more quickly than one that simply presents information. The emotional brain tags the experience as important, while pure logic often feels abstract and easy to postpone. As a result, decisions made under emotional activation feel natural and personal, even when they were externally triggered. The danger lies in how invisible this process feels. People rarely notice the moment emotion takes the lead, because it feels like intuition or instinct. But intuition can be shaped. When influence consistently reaches you through emotion first, your sense of independent judgment slowly weakens. Awareness is the only interruption. The moment you pause to identify what you are feeling before acting, the slower thinking system regains its role, and emotional control begins to lose its power. The human mind is highly sensitive to contrast. When something appears suddenly and drastically different from what we're used to, the brain raises alarms. But psychology shows that when change happens slowly, those alarms stay silent. This process is known as gradual Small deviations from what feels acceptable don't trigger resistance, because the brain compares them only to what came just before, not to the original standard. At first, the change feels minor, almost harmless. The brain labels it as an exception, a one-time thing, or something temporary. Because the emotional reaction is weak, the mind doesn't store the moment as important. Without strong emotional tagging, memory and caution don't activate. This allows the next small shift to feel just as manageable, even though it moves further away from what once felt right. With repetition, the brain begins to reinterpret reality. What was once uncomfortable now feels familiar, and familiarity creates safety. Psychologically, humans confuse repeated exposure with correctness. This is called the mere exposure effect. The more often we encounter something, the more normal and acceptable it feels, regardless of its actual impact. Over time, discomfort fades, not because the situation improved, but because the brain adapted. As normalization continues, social cues reinforce the shift. When others appear unbothered, the brain assumes there must be no real threat. Humans are deeply wired for social alignment, so questioning the change begins to feel like overreacting. The internal dialogue shifts from "this feels wrong" to "maybe I'm being too sensitive." At this point, resistance dosen, the hust weaken, it turns inward as self-doubt. The most dangerous part is that by the time awareness returns, the baseline has already moved. People don't realize how much has changed, because there was no single moment that felt alarming enough to stop everything. Standards then collapse. Erode. Control succeeds, not by forcing acceptance, but by patiently waiting for the mind to adjust. And once the new normal settles in, the old one feels distant, unrealistic, or even unnecessary. Human beings don't just hold beliefs, they build their sense of self around them. Psychology calls this identity fusion, a state where ideas, roles, or affiliations become emotionally tied to who a person believes they are. When this happens, a belief is no longer just information, it becomes personal. Any challenge to that belief feels like a threat, not to an opinion, but to the self. The brain reacts defensively because it interprets disagreement as an attack on identity rather than a discussion of facts. Once identity is involved, normal, critical thinking weakens. The mind's primary goal shifts from discovering truth to protecting self. Research in social psychology shows that people are far more likely to reject evidence, distort facts, or attack the source when their identity is challenged. This isn't because they are irrational, but because the brain prioritizes psychological safety. Preserving a stable sense of self feels more urgent than updating beliefs, even when those beliefs cause harm. This is how control becomes internalized. Instead of someone enforcing rules or pressure from the outside, the individual enforces it on themselves. They defend ideas automatically, justify contradictions, and ignore warning signs because letting go would feel like losing a part of who they are. More time, emotion, and reputation invested, the stronger this grip becomes. Psychologically, this is known as sunk cost bias, combined with identity a powerful barrier to change. Language plays a major role in this process. Labels like strong, loyal, smart, or awake turn agreement into a badge of self. When people adopt these labels, disagreement becomes morally loaded. To question the idea now means risking shame, exclusion, or the feeling of being weak or wrong. The brain is deeply wired to avoid social rejection, so it clings tighter. Even when internal doubt begins to surface, the final stage is when control feels like empowerment. People believe they are thinking independently, while repeating ideas that protect their identity rather than reflect reality. True autonomy begins only when a person separates who they are from what they believe. Psychologically, growth requires the ability to say, "I was wrong," without feeling broken. The moment identity loosens its grip on belief, influence loses its strongest weapon. The human brain has limited attention and energy, and psychology shows that when those resources are constantly drained, deeper thinking collapses. A busy mind operates in survival mode, focused on immediate tasks and short-term relief. Notifications, deadlines, and constant demands keep the brain reacting instead of reflecting. When attention is fragmented, there is no space to question direction, purpose, or meaning. The mind stays occupied, but not engaged. Chronic urgency is one of the most effective psychological tools for control. When everything feels important and time-sensitive, the brain loses its ability to prioritize wisely. Stress hormones like cortisol remain elevated, narrowing focus to the next problem only. In TC state, people mistake motion for progress. They feel productive, yet internally disconnected, because their effort is driven by pressure rather than purpose. Artificial goals play a major role in this exhaustion. Metrics, comparisons, and external benchmarks give the brain something to chase, but rarely something to fulfill it. Psychology shows that when goals are externally imposed rather than internally meaningful, motivation becomes fragile. People keep moving not because they feel satisfied, but because stopping feels dangerous. Rest begins to feel like failure, and stillness feels uncomfortable. As mental fatigue accumulates, critical thinking weakens. A tired brain avoids complexity and seeks familiarity. Instead of asking, "Why am I doing this?" it asks, "What's next?" This is not laziness, it's neurological self-protection. Reflection requires mental space, and exhaustion removes that space entirely. Over time, people stop questioning systems that drain them, because questioning itself feels like extra work. This is why control doesn't rely on force. It relies on keeping people tired enough to accept whatever structure already exists. When exhaustion becomes normal, fulfillment feels unrealistic. People adapt to constant strain and call it life. Psychologically, the moment someone rests long enough to think clearly is the moment control weakens. Awareness doesn't require rebellion, it requires energy, and exhaustion is designed to take that away. The human brain is highly responsive to rewards, but it reacts most strongly not to constant rewards, but to unpredictable ones. Psychology calls this intermittent reinforcement. When rewards arrive, inconsistently sometimes now. Sometimes later the brain releases more dopamine than it would from a guaranteed outcome. Dopamine is not the chemical of pleasure. It is the chemical of anticipation. It motivates you to keep going, not because you are satisfied, but because you believe something rewarding might happen next. Small wins play a crucial role in this process. A brief moment of success, recognition, or relief convinces the brain that effort is paying off, even if progress is minimal. These moments act like psychological breadcrumbs, just enough to prevent quitting. The brain remembers the reward more vividly than the long periods of frustration that surround it. As a result, people stay invested far longer than logic would suggest is reasonable. Occasional praise strengthens the effect by attaching reward to approval. Humans are deeply wired to seek social validation because, historically, acceptance meant survival. When praise appears unpredictably, the brain works harder to earn it again. This creates a loop where behavior is adjusted not based on personal values, but on the hope of future approval. Over time, people begin measuring their worth through these rare signals, even when they feel empty in between. Uncertainty is what locks the cycle in place. When rewards are guaranteed, the brain relaxes. When they are uncertain, attention sharpens and attachment deepens. This is why people keep waiting, scrolling, checking, and hoping. Each attempt feels like it could be the one that finally pays off. Psychologically, the mind becomes more attached to the possibility of reward than to the reward itself. The most unsettling part is that this conditioning feels voluntary. There is no visible force, no obvious manipulation. People believe they are choosing to stay because leaving feels premature, unwise, or risky. But in reality, their nervous system has been trained to tolerate dissatisfaction in exchange for occasional relief. True freedom begins when someone recognizes that fulfillment should not arrive randomly, when reward becomes predictable, meaningful, and aligned with real needs. The loop breaks and control loses its hold. Here's the truth. Most people never hear. Control doesn't feel like oppression. It feels like comfort. like routine. This is just how life is, but awareness breaks the spell. The moment you question why you feel, think, or choose something, you reclaim power. Because the most controlled people aren't weak. They're unaware. And once you become aware, control loses its grip.